Am I the jerk for cutting ties with my best friend after he told me my wife was cheating on me? My name is Jake. I'm 32 years old and my life turned upside down in a single evening. Chris and I have been friends since kindergarten, and we've been through everything together: college, weddings, and many other things. He was my best man, the godfather to my daughter, and someone I trusted completely. But 2 weeks ago, he said something that I still can't get out of my mind. It was a regular Friday night. We were at my place having beer and pizza, talking about life. Everything felt normal until Chris dropped a bomb. "Jake, I need to tell you something. I've been debating whether I should, but Lindsay is cheating on you." I was stunned. My wife? Lindsay? We've been married for 6 years. We have a daughter, Olivia. I couldn't imagine her doing something like that. Chris saw my shock and added, "I know this sounds terrible, but I couldn't stay silent. I saw her a couple of weeks ago at a bar with some guy. They were way too close to just be friends." I struggled to process what he was saying. What did too close even mean? Chris went on to describe how they were sitting together, laughing, holding hands. He insisted it all looked very suspicious. That night, I barely slept. My thoughts swung between anger and denial. The next day, I confronted Lindsay. She was calm and even a bit surprised. "Jake, are you serious?" she said after hearing my accusation. "That's ridiculous. Who told you this?" When I mentioned Chris, her expression changed. She looked more upset than scared. "Chris? Why is he saying this?" We spent the entire evening talking, and Lindsay swore nothing like that had happened. She explained that she had met up with an old college friend she hadn't seen in 10 years, but there was nothing inappropriate about it. "If I were trying to hide something from you, why would I go to a local bar where anyone could see me?" she argued. Her words made sense, but doubt had already started to creep in. I wanted to believe my wife, but Chris's voice kept echoing in my head. I saw it with my own eyes. The following week, I met Chris again. I needed more details, but his story hadn't changed. In fact, he seemed offended that I doubted him. "Jake, I told you the truth. If you don't want to believe me, that's on you. But I did what I thought was right." That conversation only made things worse. On one hand, Chris had always been honest with me. On the other, Lindsay had never given me a reason to question her loyalty. Something broke in my relationship with Chris. He started avoiding me, and I did the same with him. Every attempt to talk ended in accusations from both sides. Eventually, I just stopped reaching out. Now, weeks later, I still don't know if I made the right choice. My friendship with Chris is in ruins, but I still can't tell if what he said was the truth. Each week, the tension at home increased. Lindsay tried to act normal, but I could tell it was bothering her. She started to suspect that I didn't fully trust her, even though I tried to keep my thoughts to myself. "Jake, you're still thinking about it, aren't you?" she asked one day, catching my strange look. I couldn't answer. Yes, I was thinking about it. Constantly. My nights became sleepless, my mind filled with scenes I hadn't seen but that seemed to come alive in my imagination. One evening while Lindsay was at yoga class, I took her phone. It was a low move, and I felt terrible, but I needed something to either confirm or refute Chris's words. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding. Nothing suspicious. Everything looked as it should. Messages from friends, colleagues, her mom. Not a hint of infidelity. In her photo folder, same thing. Olivia, selfies, landscapes from our last vacation. I felt relieved for a moment. And then I saw a strange name in her recent calls. Matt? I didn't know any Matt, and it threw me off balance. When Lindsay came home, I asked immediately, "Who's Matt?" She froze for a moment, but then quickly replied, "He's a friend from college. The one I met at the bar a few weeks ago. I told you about him." Her voice was steady, but something felt off. Or was I just looking for a reason not to trust her? "And why are you still calling him?" Lindsay sighed. "Jake, I know this is hard for you to accept, but I'm not hiding anything. I talked to him to see how he's doing. We hadn't seen each other in a decade, and it was just friendly." Her explanation sounded reasonable, but my suspicions took over. I decided to talk to Chris again. I needed more details, more confirmation. But his reaction to my request was unexpected. "Look, I've already told you everything. If you don't want to believe it, that's your problem. I don't want to be dragged into this circus anymore." It was strange because Chris had always been assertive and open, but now he suddenly pulled away. "Why are you acting like this? You got me into this situation, and now you refuse to talk?" "Jake, I did this for you, but I'm not going to keep repeating myself. If you want to ignore it, fine." We parted ways, and once again I was left alone with my thoughts. A few days later, I stumbled upon a strange post on social media. One of our mutual friends had posted a photo of Chris at the bar he'd mentioned. But in the picture, he wasn't alone. Sitting next to him was a woman who looked very close to him. That made me wonder, why was Chris, who had always condemned cheating, there on that day? Why hadn't he told me about it before? I started piecing the puzzle together. The photo of Chris with a stranger at that bar, his insistence on warning me about Lindsay, and then his sudden withdrawal. All of it wouldn't let me rest. I decided to dig deeper. I didn't want to seem paranoid, but my intuition told me something was off. I messaged our mutual friend, the one who had posted the photo. "Hey Tom, saw your pic with Chris. Who's the woman with him?" Tom replied almost instantly, "That's Cheryl. You know her. She's been dating him for a couple of months." Cheryl? I tried to recall, but nothing came to mind. She must have come into his life recently, since I'd heard nothing about her. "Is she from our town?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I think she works in an office on Main Street." This got me thinking. Chris hadn't mentioned her at all, even though we usually talked about things like this. I decided to confront his story once more. The next day, I spoke with Lindsay. Although our conversations had been tense, I felt it was time to clear the air. "Lindsay, I talked to Tom. He said Chris is dating someone named Cheryl. Do you know anything about this?" Lindsay looked surprised. "No, it's the first I'm hearing about it, but it explains why he's been acting so strange lately. Do you think it's connected to what he told you about me?" "I don't know," I replied honestly. Doubts were tearing me apart. I decided to visit that bar. If it had become the setting for events that turned my life upside down, maybe it could hold some answers. When I arrived, the place was nearly empty. I approached the bartender, someone I'd seen at parties before. "Hey, do you remember a couple of weeks ago my wife came here with some guy? Tall, blonde, skinny." The bartender nodded. "Yeah, they were sitting in the corner. Nothing unusual. Talking, laughing, seemed fine. Then Chris walked in and almost caused a scene." I froze. "Chris? He was here too?" "Yeah, he said something to your wife and then left. But he looked furious." My heart sank. Chris hadn't just seen Lindsay at the bar. He'd interacted with her. Why hadn't he told me this? When I got home, I told Lindsay everything. She shook her head. "I don't even know how to explain this. He came up, said something weird about me, that I was betraying your trust, and then left. I thought he was just drunk." Now I was left with a choice. Either I believe my wife, who swears she's innocent, or my best friend, who withheld critical details. After talking to Lindsay, I realized the only way to get to the bottom of everything was to meet with Chris. Too much about his behavior didn't add up. His accusations, withholding details, and his strange actions that night. We agreed to meet in the park. Chris arrived looking noticeably tense, but this time I was determined to get answers. "Chris, stop dodging the truth. You said you saw Lindsay with some guy, but why did you only tell me part of the story? Why did you hide that you spoke to her?" He hesitated, then snapped irritably. "I already told you everything, Jake. I saw what I saw. You just don't want to face reality." But his tone was overly defensive, as if he was trying to protect himself. I decided to push further. "Why were you at that bar? You said you ended up there by chance, but that's a lie, isn't it? You knew Lindsay would be there and went deliberately to see what she was doing." His face turned pale. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I didn't know." "Are you sure? Or did you think you'd find her there? Maybe you wanted to see it for yourself, so you could come to me with this truth. You even came up with an excuse, a random encounter. But in reality, you went there on purpose. Why?" He looked away, clearly trying to come up with an answer. That only reinforced my suspicion that something wasn't right. "You were watching her, looking for a reason to accuse her, and at the same time trying to destroy my trust in her. But why, Chris? Why would you do this?" This time he didn't respond immediately. His face tensed as if he was struggling to hold back emotions. Finally, he exhaled and said, "Because I'm sick of watching you live the life I was supposed to have." Those words hit me like a knife to the chest. "What? You have everything, Jake. The perfect wife, daughter, house. And me? Always second place, always your shadow. Even when I try to be the best friend, I'm just a backup. And you know what hurts the most? Lindsay. She's everything I ever wanted in a woman. I never stood a chance, but you just have it all handed to you." So yeah, I snapped. I stood there, stunned by his confession. Envy? That's what this was all about. His resentment and insecurities, and he took it out on me. Do you realize what you've done? You nearly destroyed my marriage. I trusted you, Chris. I thought of you as my brother. But now I see it was all a game to you. One where you just wanted to take something from me. He didn't respond. His face was a mix of guilt and defiance, but I couldn't stand it anymore. This is it, Chris. Our friendship is over. Everything is over. I can't keep someone like you in my life, someone who would betray me so easily. He turned and walked away silently, not even trying to explain or make things right. When I got home, I told Lindsay everything. She listened carefully without interrupting, and then said, "You know, it hurts. But maybe now you see who was always truly on your side. You got through this, and I'm proud of you." A few months have passed since then. Lindsay and I are working on rebuilding complete trust. It's been a tough lesson for both of us. As for Chris, I haven't seen or heard from him again. Sometimes I wonder, how can someone you considered family turn out to be so destructive? And can I blame myself, even partially, for not noticing the signs sooner? What do you think? Can actions like this ever be justified by envy or personal failures? Or are there things that simply can't be forgiven? Write what you think in comments below.